Hi everyone, welcome to our Digital Credentials in VET webinar. My name is Trevor Fairweather and I'm the General Manager of VetTrack within the ReadyTech Group, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by two leading thinkers in digital credentials and VET. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Matthew Dale, founder at Educonomy. Welcome, Matt. Matt has been in the VET sector for many years, working in RTOs, consulting to them, and in recent years been driving awareness of micro-credentials in VET. He regularly speaks on the subject and I'm sure is well known by many of the audience. Also joining me today is David Kinsella, founder of Everitas. Hello, David. Over many years, David has worked with leading educators and L&D professionals to successfully implement a wide range of digital credential programs in Europe and the Asia-Pac region. David also, through Everitas, supports ReadyCred as our implementation partner. Now, before I hand over to Matthew to discuss the application of digital credentials in Australian VET, I just wanted to flag that today's webinar is being recorded. So should you have any colleagues that couldn't make it today, we'll have the recording available to share shortly after the webinar. The goal of today's webinar is to help demystify digital credentials and micro-credentials, specifically their application in a VET context. So you'll notice the Q&A panel within your webinar panel. Throughout the session, please ask any questions and we'll aim to answer them via the Q&A panel and at the end of the presentation. Our scheduled time for the webinar is 1 hour. We're aiming to finish the presentation in about 45 minutes and have 15 minutes for questions. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thanks, Trevor. I just going to get my slides open. If you give me 1 second. Trevor, are you happy just to confirm that you can see all of that up on the screen okay from your end?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Fantastic. Now, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy week and your busy schedule to invest into the future of your organization and what it is that you deliver. I'm hoping that we can cover through a lot of content in this session today, and it is a short time, so we'll try our best to push through as quick as we can. But if there are questions that you do have throughout the presentation, if you could record those down in the Q&A, we'll do our best to answer those towards the end. Many of you may know me. My name is Matthew Dale. I'm the founder of Educonomy, and I'm also the Chief Operations Officer for Audit Express. Today, I'm here to talk to you about micro-credentials and micro-learning in the VET context. The 4 areas that I want to cover off on are, first of all, to unpack the use of digital credentials, micro-learning, and digital badges in the Australian VET context. Also to explore how digital credentials can be used in VET. We'll look at some case studies of digital credentials in practice, and also we'll explore how digital credentials could be used in your organization. The first thing that I want to touch on is that it's important to acknowledge that there currently is no definition for micro-credentials in the AQF. That isn't to say that you're excluded currently from delivering micro-credentials, quite the opposite actually. Micro-credentials have been delivered in this country for quite a while. What we do know is that micro-credentials are more than just standalone units of competency or skill sets. While they may be aligned to, and in some cases may represent or reflect standalone units of competency or skill sets, that's not always going to be exclusively the case. If we take a look through the review of the AQF that was released a few months back, there's some key recommendations that are made in that. And one of the main recommendations is that guidelines are developed in the AQF pathways policy to facilitate the recognition of shorter form credentials, including micro-credentials for credit, and that this should include the following. So first of all, the characteristics to be included in shorter form credentials that would facilitate their recognition for credit transfer or articulation into AQF qualifications. And B, the principles to be used by institutions that wish to align shorter form credentials to an AQF band. There's a lot of work that's currently being done around the country at the moment as part of the vocational education and training reform roadmap. Consultations are now very much underway, certainly in Victoria and New South Wales. Up on the screen at the moment, you'll see that there's an email address listed there for the Victorian consultations that are underway, and they're open until the 20th of March. So there's still a few days there for you to give feedback in relation to the definition of micro-credentials and what needs to change to support the operation of the definition in the vet sector. These are two key things that the sector is grappling with, and a lot of the conversations that I'm having with my clients out on the field are very much coming to terms with and understanding the many terms that are flying around at the moment. And the reality is we don't currently have a taxonomy or a set of terms that are accepted, and that's really one of the first steps that need to be overcome. So for the purpose of today's presentation, the definition that we'll be relying on is for micro-credentials is the definition that's been provided in the review of the AQF or the Australian Qualifications Framework. You'll see an infographic here on the right-hand side. This is an infographic that I've prepared, and we've taken the 4 key examples that are provided within the review of the AQF. And they are that a micro-credential can either be additional to a formal qualification, alternative to a formal qualification, complementary to a formal qualification, or a component of a formal qualification. So on this infographic, I've included some examples of what may include or what each of these may include. And I'm not going to go through each of those now. You can certainly find this infographic up on pretty sure I've posted it on my LinkedIn page. Otherwise, you'll certainly have a copy of these slides following the presentation. I think the sector does need to determine whether or not this limited list is comprehensive and inclusive of all of the potential use cases. Certainly in me putting this infographic out, there's been a lot of feedback received wide and far, and some of the feedback from overseas, both in the US and Canada, would perhaps suggest that this list could be added to, and that it's a good starting point, but perhaps a little bit more work needs to be done in fleshing this out, but certainly a good start. So the vet sector is facing major changes on several fronts, and this will come as no surprise to you. You'll all be aware of the changes that are underway with ASWA. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see changes in the next 12 to 18 months to the RTO standards. One thing that we have all experienced in the last few years is massive changes to the way that vet is funded at both the state and federal level. And we will continue to see more cuts and changes taking place in that area. This will particularly affect you if your organisation is a private training organisation or a learn local or community college. And the way in which you deliver training moving forward is something that you really do need to give consideration to. And I believe that micro-credentials can really form a big part of that, and that's something we'll continue to discuss through today's webinar. And the other obvious one is training packages, and in many cases, training packages for organisations are the ticking time bomb for a number of reasons. First of all, many training packages haven't really undergone a whole lot of significant update in the last decade, and are left in many cases not really reflecting the job roles that are still existing in industry. And in other cases, the change that does come into place is quite expensive and costly for organisations to implement the changes as they come along. So this is a real risk for training providers, and also with emerging industries that aren't necessarily represented by a training package. Again, that's another area that micro-credentials really do come in, and shorter form qualifications. Automation, artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, all of these areas are not covered by a training package, and I don't believe that training packages could possibly move fast enough to be able to come up with qualifications and training products to deliver the training to fill the job needs of tomorrow. So we really do need to start innovating and thinking a little bit smarter about how we develop training products and offer those to the market in a way that is responsive to the needs of the speed at which industry is currently moving. So what does all this mean for tertiary education providers and the RTOs across Australia? Well, first of all, I think it's really important to look at the statistics and look at the numbers. So the image up on the screen here is a bit of an infographic that is modeled off some research that SHA completed in 2019. And this is data that relates to 2019 MOOC enrollments. And what had been found is that there were 110 million students in 2019 studying online with more than 900 universities in 13,500 courses. That equated to 50 MOOC-based degrees and more than 820 micro-credentials. This list is growing every day, and the numbers and the figures from SHA's research have really jumped up from 2018. What's really important to note here is that this data excludes China. So if you are working in the Chinese market, or if you're interested in the Chinese market, that's not even reflected here. So if those numbers were to also be included, obviously the numbers up on the screen here would be a lot larger. This growth has just been exponential. The top 5 MOOC providers up on the screen here include Coursera, edX, Udacity, FutureLearn, and Swayam. You'll note that this doesn't include LinkedIn, Lynda Learning. It doesn't include Open Learning. It doesn't include a lot of the other newer and emerging platforms that are there. This is only the top 5, and it's an impressive number of enrollments and active enrollments that they've got there. These are your key competitors. If you're offering short courses in creative writing, or if you're offering short courses in cooking cakes and you're wondering why you're not getting enrollments like you would have once upon a time, if you're finding that some of your diploma level courses, again, you're just not getting the enrollments that you once were, it might be worthwhile jumping online, taking a look at the courses being offered by these providers and looking at what they're offering out in the market. And a lot of the learning is low cost. In some cases, the learning piece is free, and the quality of the learning material that is offered, or the learning content offered, is often a lot higher than we see in the Australian market. We're facing a massive disruption. I've described this as an Uber taxi level disruption to tertiary education on a global scale. And the enrollment figures in Australia over the past 5 years would certainly reflect that as well. So one question that I'd like you to really take away from today is, how does your organization, your RTO, approach learning? We're always focused on clause 1.8. We're always focused on assessment tools, but how is it you focus learning? Because in the micro-credential environment, when course content is offered in the online environment, if you take a look at what your competitors, what those top 5 MOOC providers are doing, they're offering their learning in bite-sized chunks. And this should be less than 15 minutes at a time, typically. Very rich in audio and video content, and it should also be device-friendly. The way that I describe this content is that it should be able to be completed anywhere, anytime, from any device. The reality is you should be able to jump on a tram from Flinders Street Station, and by the time you get down St Kilda Road to your office 15 minutes later, you should have been able to complete one block of learning, one small topic, the same way that you would if you were listening to a podcast. This is where content is going, and certainly if you're delivering training to the younger generation, I look at my teenage children, and their way of consuming data right now via TikTok and Snapchat is limited to about 15 seconds. I think if I could get their attention to learn a particular topic for 15 minutes, I would be doing pretty well. So that's one thing I'd like to leave with you, because that's something that will need a fair bit of reflection, how you currently approach learning and whether or not your content is going to be conducive for offering online. And what that should point you towards is whether or not you've actually got a plan in place to modernize and digitalize your learning materials. In the wake of coronavirus, I know a lot of universities and TAFE organizations are certainly already really focusing their efforts and attention to this. If for particular reasons you needed to stop offering classroom-based training, how would you actually go about getting that up online, and what would it mean? What would you need to do? So the next thing I'd like to talk to you about are digital badges, and to really start to unpack that and what are the potential use cases and applications. If we start with a definition here, definitions are important. A digital badge, put simply, is a validated indicator of an accomplishment, skill, quality, or interest that can be earned in a variety of learning environments. Typically a digital image file containing metadata that can be used to verify the origin and authenticity of the badge, and details obtained skills and or knowledge attained that the badge represents. So a little bit later in the slide, we'll look at the AQF qualifications that are issued and how they can apply to badges. But first, what I'd like to do is take a look at some of the solutions that micro-credentials and digital badges can offer your organization. So the key points that stand out to me are that your training will be delivered in a way that is more responsive to the needs of both learners and industry. You'll have higher levels of student engagement, satisfaction, and completion, higher levels of employee retention and productivity in industry, particularly if you're an enterprise RTO or if you're working closely with industry. Micro-credentials and micro-learning can rapidly respond to the needs of industry, which is moving at a fast pace. Many of the training needs that industry currently have are not serviced by units of competency or qualifications. And even where they are serviced by qualification, more often than not, it's the funding that drives the training that we deliver. It's the funding that drives you to go and enroll students or employees into a full qualification, when often industry might not need that full qualification, and in many cases have got a budget, they've got funds there, and they're happy to pay for it fee for service. That's the sweet spot where micro-credentials can really offer a difference in industry, regardless of whether there is a unit of competency or qualification existing, because it offers a platform that you can put quality and responsive learning material up onto. So one area that is of particular interest to me is the role that both micro-credentials and digital badges can play with increasing engagement and completion of trainees and apprentices. We've seen year on year a massive drop, not just in Australia, but also across other parts of the world, particularly in the UK, where the engagement and completion of trainees and apprentices has plummeted. This isn't only attributable to the lower wages that are paid. It does sort of point towards the engagement level and the level of engagement with the trainees and apprentices themselves. The example I like to give with this particular case is, if you reflect back, if any of you were a Cub Scout or a Girl Guide or a Brownie when you were growing up, and you were busy collecting badges, demonstrating skills so that you could get badges to sew onto your arm, the same kind of thing applies. If you're to break down your apprenticeship programs, your traineeship programs, and to establish meaningful badges along the way that will reflect what it is that a particular learner has attained along the way, they've got visibility. They've got a dashboard that is visible. They can see how far they've tracked along, how they're progressing, and what lies ahead. They can also take a step back and look at what they've already achieved and have that sense of pride. At the moment, we have the capacity really to issue a statement of results out of the student management system, which lists a whole lot of units and an outcome of either competent or not yet competent. And depending on what variation you put on that, it's not really that meaningful or engaging. So micro-credentials and digital badges can also potentially be used in secondary education. And I do think that this is something that policymakers in this space need to really tackle and start to think about. And I do think that there's an opportunity with the Melbourne Declaration that is still partially underway to seriously rethink what role these could play in the next decade of secondary education in this country. Again, if I look at my teenage children, my son achieved a hell of a lot more and took a lot more on from having a part-time job role than he did from undertaking Year 9 maths. Learning how to use an Everitas terminal, learning how to use a menu log terminal, and how to process payments both cash and through an FPOS terminal were a lot more meaningful for him. And I really do question what role digital badges could play in secondary education, particularly for those kids that have got a part-time job. So what is all this going to look like in practice in your organization? I did mention before we'd come and take a look at the qualifications. One great way of thinking of this is that digital badges do have similar features to an AQF award. When you pick up a qualification or a statement of results, you know what key features you're looking at. You'll know that you can see the logo of the organization that's issued it. There are keywords that will indicate whether it's a qualification or a statement of attainment. You'll be able to identify the student's name, the course in which they enrolled, the date that it was issued, the standards that they were issued under, etc. And obviously on the record of results, you'll see all of the units that have been issued. Digital badges contain the same type of data, only it's in metadata and it's verifiable. So let's take a look at a couple of case studies of where micro-credentials have been used in VET. And I want to first of all point over towards the UK with a great public example that's available. And you can do a bit more reading up on this. It's all up on the web. And the case study I want to give you is City and Guilds, which is a leading training provider out of the UK. So City and Guilds have worked with some leading hairdressing professionals, including Tony and Guy and others, to come up with the set of standards that they wanted to use. So if you look on the right-hand side here, you'll see the earning criteria. And this, if you click through a little bit further, would take you to what is our equivalent of a unit of competency. And it is attached to a badge here. So this badge, or this particular badge, is for the skill set of perming hair. And that badge, once it's attained, tells a story about that particular student. It tells a story about the skills that they've attained, what it is that they needed to demonstrate to earn that criteria, what standards are relevant or apply to that particular criteria, and who issued that particular badge. Now, this, again, is a lot more meaningful, and the visual representation on this has a lot more meaning to both the learner and to industry. And I think this has got a whole lot of potential use cases in the Australian context, not only in hairdressing, but also in a number of other course areas or qualifications. So when building these micro-credentialed approaches to delivering qualifications, I always recommend that you start with the outcome in mind. Build the training program around the position description and the typical work tasks of the job that aligns to what it is you're delivering to. Group specific learning activities that relate to key job functions and work tasks together. And then once you've got the framework and the blueprint of how you want to deliver that training program, at that point, start to map the units of competency back in once the program has been designed. Far too often what we see in VET is that we start with the units of competency in mind. We'll look at the title of the units of competency and make the decision, if we're going to cluster these two units, they look like they'll work well together. Some training packages, for example, retail that we've got up here at the moment, the elective units have been bundled together. So you'll see the example here of communication and teamwork. There are 2 units of competency that sit under that as electives. It's not to say that communication and teamwork are exclusively limited to those units. So if we use the example of a retail training program, again, don't start with standalone or clustered units of competency. Work with industry to build a set of topics or subjects that reflect the job role you're training towards. And I've had a chat with a few colleagues that work in retail management, and some of the feedback that they've come back to me with is that topics or subjects in retail might include things like opening your point of sale, closing your point of sale, serving customers, visual merchandising, minimizing theft, promoting and upselling goods and services. These are the key roles that really apply in the job context of retail. There might even be a separate topic here for, using Apple Pay, a particular piece of technology that's new and emerged in industry. Apple Pay as a means of payment is certainly not covered in a unit of competency. And that's because the retail training package hasn't been able to move fast enough. So if we take a look at what this might look like here, over on the right-hand side, you'll see an image that I've applied here. So we've got digital badges that may be applied at that topic level. So along the bottom row here, we've got open your point of sale, close your point of sale, serve customers and loyalty programs may be your topics, and a digital badge may be applied once you've achieved each of those topics. Now, the micro-credential may be applied for the overall theme or topic area of managing point of sale systems. And you may have 2 or 3 units of competency that fit underneath that particular micro-credential. Now, once you've achieved all of the badges and all of the credentials that apply to the qualification that you're delivering, then the macro credential or the full qualification would be awarded. Now, you might look at this and think to yourself that it doesn't really look too much different to clustering. And in some ways, you're right. it doesn't really look too much different to clustering units of competency. What is different is the traditional learning and development approach that's been taken, opposed to the typical approach, which is to cluster standalone units of competency together for the purpose of delivering that program. Now, there's a few factors that you need to consider when you are building a framework for your organization. And you will need to build a framework if this is the path you want to go down. You need to determine, first of all, what you will and won't be issuing digital badges for. If you open up badging systems on some learning management systems, what you'll find is that you can issue badges for all kinds of things. You can issue badges for the first time you log in into the learning management system. You can issue a badge for every time you log into the learning management system. You can issue a badge for the first 5 hours of training completed. You can issue a badge for arriving on time, leaving on time, or you could issue different types of badges for students that arrive late. So there's many use cases, and depending on what your organization's needs are, will determine what you end up issuing badges for. But what you're trying to achieve here is value. There needs to be value in the badges that you're issuing. And if you're issuing badges for things like turning up or for the first time that you log in, it minimizes, in some ways, demeans the value of the badge being issued. So I typically wouldn't recommend issuing much lower than at a topic level. But again, it will be different for each organization. And you may go lower than that. You may start issuing badges if you're working with job seekers. You may actually start issuing badges for students turning up on time. That may be something that you want to value. It may be something that you want to reward. So the second thing is to define what amount of learning or application of knowledge and skills will need to be demonstrated for each badge type. You then want to be detailing the articulation between digital badges, micro-credentials, and macro-credentials. You want to then look at how you can apply this framework to the existing qualifications in your organization. And I'd caution you from starting a broad brush approach. I think it is important to start with one qualification or one training product area and to work on that and to get that right. Master one qualification before you start trying to roll this out wide and far. And the final point that I've got here is that you want to make sure that your training and assessment strategy template or other documents that fit within your training and assessment strategy are updated to include provision for detailing how digital badges, micro-credentials, and macro-credentials will be applied by your organization. One thing that you do want to make sure is that you've documented and mapped this out clearly so that if you are having conversations during review or audit with either the regulator or your funding bodies, that it is clearly mapped out and that you can explain and articulate how you are delivering accredited training and issuing badges or credentials at the same time. So what I'll leave you with is the question, what are the potential use cases for digital credentials in your RTO? And I would welcome you to reach out if any of you are keen to discuss it. I'm always up for a chat about what potential use cases are out there and how it might work in your organization. Trevor, I'll hand back to you.
Fantastic. Okay, just confirming everyone can see my screen okay again. Thanks again, and Matthew, just I think a great couple of examples of how RTOs can be really thinking about breaking up their learning. Now, just before I hand over to David to talk a bit more about the technology application of digital credentials, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to highlight how ReadyTech is supporting the issue of digital credentials right from within our student management systems. Last year, we were pleased to partner and now integrate our student management systems with Credly, the world's leading digital credentialing platform. Through this partnership and integration, our VetTrack and JR Plus student management systems can now easily and seamlessly issue digital credentials to your learners. As Matthew mentioned, once the relevant learning has been completed and that you've assessed it as competent within your student management system, you can simply choose to issue a digital credential to that student. Upon issuing the digital credential, your learner will receive an email where they can then claim their digital credential. And once they claim their digital credential, they can then share their achievement via numerous social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. At any time, for example, an employer, for instance through a recruitment process, can then click on the digital credential, verify the details and the accuracy of the digital credential, and see the learning and assessment that has been undertaken to achieve the credential. Here, the employer can see the education institution that has also delivered the training, which essentially helps promoting an RTO's brand. The process of issuing digital credentials is extremely simple, and this is a really nice segue for me to hand over to David, who'll talk more about many of the benefits that the technology solution can offer your learners, employers, and your RTO. Okay, over to you, David. Are you with us, David, still?
Yes, I am muted by the host.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Have you got me, and can you hear me now?
Yeah, can hear you well, thank you.
Good on you. Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction, Trevor. Look, Matt, great to be sharing the space with you today in this session, and thanks for some of your insights. Today, what I'd like to do is jump into the technology and to show you some examples of how organisations are articulating some of their courses into the metadata of digital credentials. And I'd like to give you today 3 perspectives on the use of the technology. One is receiving a digital credential. So as the earner of a digital credential, what does that look like? What does that mean to a student? What opportunities does that afford to the student? The second perspective to have a look at will be from the consumer. When somebody, if you're issuing digital credentials, what does someone that is looking at that potential candidate showing that digital credential, what are they looking at? What decisions can they make based on the data that's in that digital credential, the evidence that's in it? So we'll look at that perspective as well. And the final and probably critical perspective is from an issuer. So as a training organisation, as an employer with an enterprise RTO, what is it? What are the mechanisms that you can engage to allow a student to communicate and tell their learning outcomes? Before we jump into those perspectives, what I wanted to do is just to sort of underscore some of Matt's comments, and that is when an RTO is first in that discovery phase and they come to us and they say, look, we're interested in digital credentials, we don't quite understand what's going on with them. We then start that by asking a few basic questions, and we can ask those questions, just pose them today for you to think about. Is, look, what is the motivation? What are you trying to do? And when we break that down, the noble cause that comes across is we really want to allow our students to unlock more value from the learning that we provide. We want to allow our students, our graduates, to tell their professional story online in a more consistent way. So we want to be best able to distill down what this earner is capable of doing as a result of completing this learning and not lose anything in the translation, in what they're achieving, and giving them the best shot to tell the best possible story for themselves online or in an application process. So that's the noble cause, right? Unlock more value from the programs we deliver. When you start to dig that down a bit and you start to get into the pragmatic reasons why a training organisation would issue digital credentials, then you get things like, we want to be seen as the training provider of choice in the target markets that we're in, all right? So we want to be visible in the professional networks that all of our students are in. Okay, so that will lead to more enrolments. People will see us, they'll see us as a training provider of choice, and they'll be able to look at the badges and make some decisions. Hey, that's a program I'd like to do. So that's number one. Number two, what they would like to do is build re-enrollments, students coming back for more. And if you can successfully allow a student to unlock the value of their programs and get into a new career opportunity, a promotion or whatever, and that experience of continuing professional development is enabled by you, well then re-enrollments build. The other pragmatic benefit is increasing persistence from foundational to mastery on a long form program of learning. And how do I increase course completions? Because ultimately that is going to deliver the most benefits to the student. And so if you bundle all of those things together and they say, well, look, we want to transcend the transcript. We want to have better outcomes for our students. Well, then digital credentials deliver quite profound and positive impacts in every one of those areas. And we're seeing such a significant impact globally. So the work that we did in Europe, the work that we do across Asia Pacific, and the work that's being done through Credly in the US has meant that at the beginning of 2019, there were 15 million digital credentials on the Credly Acclaim platform. 12 months later, it's 30 million. So doubled in 12 months. So people are starting to get the idea of how a digital credential can add value. And while ever the argument is going on about whether you can align it to a package or it's non-aligned or credit bearing or not credit bearing, those decisions go on, but that shouldn't stop anybody unlocking the value, more value for the student using digital credentials. So we're happy to be ReadyCred's implementation partner, and we're also happy to, if you have further questions, either at the end of this session or beyond that for a deeper dive beyond the 20 minutes that we've got, happy to do that. So can I just confirm that my screen is now visible? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
You got it? Great. Okay. So let's start with, look, where do you want to see digital credentials out in the wild? Where do you want to see people consuming digital credentials? Well, a good place to start is if you go to your Twitter feed and you just key into the search bar, view my verified achievement. And here what you can see is if you just start at the very top of the page, you can see any number of individuals trading in the currency of themselves. And so you can see many organizations articulating their programs into digital credentials and then sharing them out through this environment. And on any one of these, I'll show you a couple of interesting things. First of all, you can click through the digital credential itself. This will take you to the Credly Acclaim platform. And what you can do is you can then click verify. And in real time, it's making an assessment that this is a true and valid representation of somebody's capacity to do something, and that it's backed by the issuing entity, and it's not a self-proclaimed professional profile. So automatically what you're seeing is a very quick way to be able to validate somebody's capacity to do something, their knowledge, skills, their attributes, their accomplishments. And so this is from the Twitter environment. If you were to visit my LinkedIn profile, you'd see a little bit about employers, my company, you'd see education, you'd see my digital credentials in this environment. And again, you can see I've been issued one by Cognitive Class AI. You can click on that. Again, it will take you through to the Credly Acclaim platform. And in real time, you can say, hey, this is a valid representation of a competency, a skill, a micro piece of learning, a micro credential. Okay. So to look at a specific capacity from the for somebody that's received a digital credential to share that, you can see that I have a profile, and my profile, I can share that with interested parties. And you can see that I've got on display publicly 6 badges. Now, the one thing you'll note is that the platform advocates for earners. So you're not seeing instances, lockdown instances by issuer. So for ReadyCred or for my company, Everitas, for IBM, Ernst & Young, any of the number of universities that are using the platform, the view is the same. The UI is very easy to navigate. And it's not only the view of an earner profile, but it's also the construction of every single badge. So for me, I can very simply, and I'll do this quite quickly, I've got my engine room, my dashboard, I can merge email accounts and so on, but I can very quickly from here take a badge, digital credential, and I can either choose to make that public or private, and then I can share it. So in the process of sharing, very simply, I can add my details across to licenses and certifications in LinkedIn, share to Twitter, Facebook, Zing. I can email it directly to an individual, download that image and metadata and put that in my signature block, website, blog, or I can print a certificate directly from the badge itself. And if in the case of this particular badge here, if I look at my dashboard, my Credly Ambassador badge, we also have the capacity quite seamlessly to share directly to blockchain. So without much fuss, it's just a matter of sharing to blockchain, creating that more enhanced level of validation, that immutable record on blockchain, and then being able to download a certificate and to verify that in a third-party verified blockchain verification service. So sharing a badge is very straightforward, and certainly consuming a badge is very easy when you look at it in the environment of a professional network or Twitter. And I can also send a transcript directly from my collection of badges. I can choose to make some private and then issue it, create a transcript very simply. And that will only contain the links and the images directly back to the badges itself. And so therefore you can verify directly from an academic transcript. Okay, so if I just go back to my dashboard for a minute, one of the things that is equally important to look at is the construction of the digital credentials on the platform. And across those 30 million that are on the platform, they're consistent. So I consider this to be an elevator pitch for a skill, but it's like having IBM in the elevator with you, because it's them that's backing you and your competency. And so we have a statement of what the earner of this badge is capable of doing. We have who's issued it. We've got a small thumbnail sketch of the academic rigor that underpins it. This provides a link through to the environment of, in this case, cognitive class AI. So this takes the viewer of this badge or the earner of this badge back to the environment of the training organisation, and you can see some earning criteria and some insights. But what you'll see in this badge, and what I'll do is I'll call up one that may be more relevant to the market here. So if we look at Builders Academy, for instance, okay. Builders Academy offer 2 digital credentials, one for certified building and construction manager in commercial, and one for residential. And these are innovative and certainly showing you best practice in many ways. So if I was to click on one of these, you'll see again the same look and feel for the metadata, which includes an image. Here's a thumbnail sketch of the academic rigor. Here's a link through to Builders Academy itself. And you can see here that there's some earning criteria. And you can see here that it aligns to the package. Okay, so when you click on the package here, really simply, it takes you through to the underpinning details of that particular package. Okay, so that's embedded within the frame of each badge that's issued. So me as a consumer, a potential employer of a construction manager, being able to see how it aligns to a package is robust, it's strong. So, you know, while the debate rages on about, you know, what this aligns to and what's credit bearing and what isn't, you can have either, and you can articulate it very easily into the frame of the digital credentials on the Credly Acclaim platform. But where it starts to get really powerful is if you want to connect learning with earning, you know, unlock more value for the student, the opportunity is best expressed by these skills tags. So we use Gartner Talent Neuron technology, which is scanning job boards every day globally, and it's pulling the keywords out of those positions vacant, and it's matching them off directly in real time with the skills that are represented in this digital credential. So if I click here, what you'll see is that it takes me directly to opportunities by title, by location, by salary range, by top employers. And further on, you can see more details, more granularity, and related skills if you want to keep developing your capacity, or what other keywords might be aligned to that within the position descriptions. So I can simply go construction manager in Australia. That's good. I can click there. I can see that there's a construction manager here, position vacant in Bella Vista, Queensland for Woolworths. I can click on that position and then I can apply for that position. And I can use my digital credential from the Builders Academy as third-party verified evidence of my capacity to complete or fulfill some aspect of that role. And really, this is about getting the technology out of the road. This is about saying we're going to educate somebody to do something, and then we're going to do whatever we can to clear the path ahead of them to connect it with a new opportunity. And that is really, I think, the essential objective of the ReadyCred program, is to say whatever learning is delivered through the student management systems and the infrastructure of VETRAC and JobReady, how do we then clear the path of everybody that's on those platforms and connect them with opportunities? And so that's the bottom line for the technology. And so this is why the shift from transcending the transcript. How do we create that really distilled view of what somebody's capable of doing, and then make opportunities appear for them? So that's a little bit of the view from what a consumer would see or what an issuer would see. What does it look like from the administrator? So for someone that's creating a badge program, there is some really powerful functionality and very simple functionality. And we like to say that we can go as quickly as you want to go to test and to roll out programs. And the powerful capacity to create a badge and then to embed within the badge recommendations for what a student needs to do next. So the best time to invite somebody to continue to learn is when they're most pleased with having achieved something. So within a digital credential on the Credly Acclaim platform, you can actually say, congratulations, here's this, you've earned this, well done, and here's 30% off your next course. And so you can actually bake that into the badge, which is visible to the earner and not to the public when it's shared. So we can create templates, and very simply you can see, and I'm not going to run through too much detail here, but you can simply create the name of the badge, name it, add your criteria, add attributes to the badge. What level is this at? So this is learning, and you can say that it's, for the sake of this argument, you can say that it's foundational, that it's taken weeks to do, and that it's a paid program. Okay. You can then add standards. So what package does this align to? What level does this align to? You can simply add those to it and provide links to standards. And you saw that within the Builders Academy badge, and add more standards. And here you can make recommendations to a specific job board. You can make recommendations to attend an alumni network. Many opportunities to deeply engage on an ongoing basis with your students, your learners, your employees through this mechanism of making recommendations for what to do next, and making a sequence, a stack of learning objectives, and line them all up in the taxonomy in useful ways. And then it's just a matter of saving that as a draft or publishing it. And you can make collections private and public, and there are other features, and we don't have time to cover all of those today. But once you've started creating your badges, you can then issue in bulk, up to 5,000 at a time. You can add collections, add your badges into certain collections and curate them in meaningful ways. And then you can start to issue. And the process of issuing will also allow you to add evidence. So if you want to put in an AQF document that relates to some compliance requirement, we'll simply add it to the badge itself, or reference it through the badging mechanism, and you can do that. But an interesting principle to introduce you to now is the fact that because you are issuing digital credentials, you have now a much greater capacity to analyse and track what your students, your graduates, are doing with those, because essentially you will own them. They will live with your students, so you can time limit them, you can revoke them, you can update them, and so on. So it's a very powerful mechanism to be able to track, and I'll give you a quick example here of some analytics associated with the trackability of badges. And so if I look here at a slightly larger database, let me look at analytics, and we can certainly provide a more granular with the account management services that ReadyCred provide and we provide, a far more granular level of reporting. But at the highest level, you can see that, you know, in the last 12 months, for instance, we'll let it generate some data here. You can see badges issued, acceptance, pending, rejected rates, and you can see sharing patterns. If it's a professional badge, this is a good thing to see. Shares, and you can start to download data from in detail or in summary. Okay, so that's just a thumbnail sketch of the technology. And if we go back to that example of the Builders Academy, and we're looking at that here, you can see that the capacity to build badges and curate them, over time, you can make these programs more and more granular. And Matt Dale referred to the programs at City and Guilds. And the objective for City and Guilds was to have 1.5 million certifications, qualifications annually ending in a digital credential. So this is at scale now globally, and we're more than happy to continue to support ReadyCred, to tell you more of these stories, to show you more examples, and then to assist you define your objectives and programs. So happy to take questions now and hand back to Trevor. And if you need any further consultation, please, through Trevor, let us know.
Thanks, David. All right, so just making sure you guys can see my screen. So hopefully that made a lot of sense. Just having a couple of issues with the screen share here. Give me 1 second, guys. Just make sure that comes through. Yeah, I think that's good now. Fantastic. So yeah, some great examples there from David of how the technology can really support the recognition of learning. So so thanks again, David and Matt. So we'll just now open up the questions to the audience. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through. So we've got one here from Claire Fraser. So can digital badges be issued to organisations and businesses, not just individuals? So I might get David to answer that one.
Yeah, can you hear me, Trevor? Am I good?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And one of the key, you can create 2 types of badges. One can be issued to an individual, the other can be issued to an organisation. If you issue a badge to an organisation, you can, and that's something that we did at City and Guilds. It was through our Assured program, we audited programs for third-party institutions, issued a badge that they could use by many individuals in that organisation. A great revenue stream for City and Guilds, and certainly a very powerful tool to be able to endorse an institution or an entity. Yep, great question, and the answer is yes.
Great, thanks, David. Another question from Jenny. Do you see this being used with students who are still in school, completing a school-based apprenticeship? So I might pass that one on to Matthew.
For sure. Okay, can you see me and hear me okay?
We can hear you, Matt. So the question from Jenny was, do you see this being used with students who are still in school, completing a school apprenticeship?
Absolutely. So there is some research that's currently underway in this space, and schools, a select number of schools are already starting to issue badges for their general secondary education, but also with the vet-in schools and school-based traineeship and apprenticeship. I think at an individual provider level, you've got a huge opportunity right now to solidify the relationships that you've got with the secondary schools that you're working with. And if you can find a way to issue badges in collaboration with, I think that's where the sweet spot would be, and quite a powerful way of engaging with that age group of learners.
Can I add something there to that to underscore what Matt is saying, is that we work with many schools globally, and yes, it is incredibly important to start to allow students to develop transferable skills, social mobility skills, professional enterprise skills, whatever you want to call them, so that they can engage as they go through the latter stage of secondary education into tertiary education to better meet the needs of the workforce. And we're working with some very high quality schools in Australia that are pushing the boundaries. And in the UK, we worked with many K-12 institutions. And I'm happy to share examples of specific badges after this session.
Great, thanks David and Matt. Another question from Jeff. So in order to offer students to upskill themselves, where do you source the courses, or do you stay with the same provider or use another provider? I might pass that one on to Matthew to answer.
So just so I want to make sure I'm sort of reading that question correctly. The question is the portability of the units after the badges after they've been issued.
I think it's more around the content that you're using to upskill your students. Do you need to source that from somewhere else?
Okay, when you source the courses, yeah. So look, I would be saying in the first instance, providers really do want to be trying to build content themselves, or to figure out how they can adapt the content that they might be sourcing. If your organization is currently heavily reliant on purchasing and delivering off-the-shelf content, that may be part of the strategy that you need to revisit in terms of how you curate, develop, or in some cases procure content. But straight off-the-shelf content might not be so suitable in this space.
Great, thanks Matt. Another question here. What impact will this have on the regulation of the training industry? How will aligning the badges to TP, I'm assuming that's training package, to be regulated? Might pass that one on to you, Matt.
Yeah. I think watch this space is what I would be saying. I've been tipping for a while now, and we're starting to see it, that the regulator is starting to tackle clause 1.3, and they're starting to look at learning materials. They're starting to look at learner resources and how it is you're going about delivering training. I think that as providers shift more towards offering courses in a more mobile type environment, not specifically online, but as a more credentialed approach to delivery is taken, I do think that regulators will start to ask questions around how are you ensuring the quality and how are you ensuring the quality of the learning that is being offered, and how are you ensuring that learners are offered a sufficient amount of time and opportunity to learn and apply their knowledge before you jump in for that assessment piece. So that's where I was pointing before. You really do want to be making sure that you've got some solid and rigorous mapping activities in place to document and explain, and I guess to tell the story about how your credentials fit within the overall compliance framework of your organisation.
Great, thanks Matt. A couple of the providers that have joined today deliver both accredited and non-accredited training. So the question is around whether digital credentials apply to both accredited and non-accredited training. So I might pass that one on to David to answer.
Yeah, look, great. And this also sort of overlaps the previous question, is if you think about a digital credential as a far more powerful way of representing whatever it is that a student is capable of doing or knowing or has accomplished, then the impact on packages, or whether it's credit bearing or not credit bearing, it's just a matter of saying, yes, whatever we can do to liberate the value of that learning for the benefit of the earner, we should take that step. And so I often hear the question about, what's the impact on package? Well, if you want to align package and make sure that somebody gets a capstone qualification, that's great. And if you want to break out the elements within that to create on-ramps and off-ramps that are either credit-bearing or not credit-bearing, go right ahead and use the technology to do that. It's simply a matter of a better way of expressing whatever it is that individual is learning and knowing. So I hope that answers the question, but yes, apply digital credentials where you want to unlock value.
Great, thanks.
If I could possibly add, there's a couple of really good case studies that we've seen come across our table in the last couple of weeks. And one that jumps to mind was an organization that does training in the horticulture farming kind of space and is wanting to offer some great training around permaculture. And in this case, there are a few standalone blocks of learning that could be applied. Now, overall, the credential may very well be permaculture, which is a broad topic, but there were a lot of elements that needed to be fed into that, which includes soil, improving the soil quality, working with worm farms, and working with compost as well. Now, each of these standalone topics obviously feed into the overall subject or the overall course. But if these courses are built out the right way and they're broken down with badges and credentials applied the right way, as a training organization, instead of just having one standalone product that you can then offer to the market, you then have 3 smaller blocks of learning that can be completed along the way and can stand in their own right. And that's where the term stackable credentials really comes in, where each of those course topics that once upon a time would have been tied into an overall topic, you can now offer in their own right. And I think that is the real opportunity for many of the customers of VetTrack and many of the RTOs in the vet space at the moment, looking at your existing course offering and how that current subject could be broken down into smaller subjects and what the appetite in the market might be to undertake those smaller chunks of learning.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, David. I'm just conscious of time, everyone, so we might just finalise the questions there. For any of the questions that haven't been answered, we'll certainly circle back and provide a transcript of all of the questions and the answers so that you've got access to the content. So just wanted to say a big thank you to both Matthew and David for their presentations today and for sharing their thinking and experience on the subject. I hope we've gone some way to help demystify digital credentials in vet and hopefully have inspired you to think about the credentials that you could be offering your learners. For further information on setting up your digital credential program, please visit our ReadyCred website that's on the screen. We've got a step-by-step guide, which is the Digital Credentials Playbook, as well as other resources to help you on your journey to adopting digital credentials. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today, and have a great day.